Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joker Rogers here in Lagos. Nearly 500,000 people are without power in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, after Russia launched multiple strikes in the country. According to regional authorities, 470,000 consumers were cut off in the Kharkiv city and 50,000 elsewhere in the region. Traffic lights are currently not in operation and noise produced by power generators could be heard across the streets of Kharkiv as residents gathered next to an invincibility point to charge their mobile phones. Russia launched a total of 95 missiles of various types across Ukraine. Meanwhile, restoration work is underway at energy facilities across Ukraine a day after Russia fired a huge wave of missiles as people slept, knocking out power and critical infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says specialized teams are working round the clock to power up power plants. The mass strikes on targets far from the front lines were the first such wave since mid-February.
I have held several meetings today about the consequences of the massive strike on our infrastructure, another attempt by a terrorist state to wage war against a civilized society has resulted in temporary blackouts of electricity, heat and water in some of our regions and cities. The Russian missiles took the lives of 6 Ukrainians. Restoration works at energy facilities continue all day. The most difficult is in Kharkiv in the Zhytomyr region. It is not easy in Odessa, in Kiev, in Zaporizhia. Repair teams, power engineering specialists, local authorities, central government, everyone will work as long as necessary to restore power supply to the cities and areas that experience problems at the moment. And by the way, as a result of this strike, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was again disconnected from the power grid. This is a critical situation, and Russia is deliberately creating such critical situations at our nuclear facilities.
In the meantime, the Kremlin says it doubts that the attacks on the Nord Stream pipelines last September could have been carried out without state support. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov's comments come after the New York Times this week reported that U.S. officials were looking into the possibility that a pro-Ukrainian non-governmental group may have been responsible for the blasts. Russia has repeatedly asked to be allowed to join the investigations into the attacks, which ruptured 3 of the 4 pipelines on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas links that connect Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea. Investigators in Sweden, Germany and Denmark say the explosions were deliberate but have not said who might be responsible. Meanwhile, researchers from Canada and Denmark believe the lack of political mobilization for an investigation into the Nord Stream pipeline explosion indicates that the U.S. government could be the likely perpetrator of the act of economic sabotage, which has wider environmental consequences in the area. Questions have been raised after an article published early last month by former Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour Hersh claimed that the U.S. divers had installed explosives under the Nord Stream pipelines during the NATO Baltic military exercise last June, and on September 26th, the explosives were detonated.
The U.S. wants Germany to be subservient to its geopolitical objectives in Europe, and undermining the economic relationship between Germany and Russia helps in that, and it also increases the pressure on within the German government to support the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. If there was even a smidgen of belief that it was Russia that had blown it up, there would be an international investigation, and we would have heard for every day in the news there would be stories about how there's a need for an investigation. And the lack of political mobilization for that investigation tells us that it was, in fact, the U.S. government that was the likely perpetrator. as we've seen, it looks like the U.S. is going to get away with it, and the European countries are not prepared to actually stand up to Washington to demand answers and hold the U.S. government accountable for this act of economic sabotage.
We know that there was in total 4 explosions, each around 500 kilos TNT, and that of course creates an immediate shock wave that, as any explosion does, can cause harm to living organisms. So fish and mammals that are within around 4 kilometers radius from these explosions will be killed. If they are further away, up to 40 or 50 kilometers away, the mammals will experience hearing loss. And it's important, coming from an environmental point of view, also to be aware that armed conflicts have consequences also for the environment and natural organisms out there, and it's important to think about them as well. Not in the first place, because of course this is mostly a humanitarian disaster and problem. It's also an infrastructure and economic problem, but it is actually also an environmental problem.
So let's look at the last 24 hours in this crisis between Russia and the Ukraine, as we bring in former President Association of Nigerian Students in Volgograd, Jonah Egiga, who joins me from Volgograd in Russia. Jonah, good to see you today.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
So Russia has again launched a barrage of missile strikes across Ukraine, targeting critical infrastructure. What do you make of this latest attack?
Well, the attacks was as a result of the terrorist attack we had in Paris a couple of days ago. This was criticized by the president himself, and he rightly mentioned that there was going to be repercussions for terrorist attack against his people, because this was an attack to a civilian convoy of a mother, a little boy that was 10 years old, and we actually expected or anticipated that this was going to happen.
So Volgograd, where you are, is a commercial city in Russia. Speak to us about the situation there.
Well, for the people living in Volgograd, though, it's not really so fierce or so heated as those living by the neighboring cities that really shares boundary with Ukraine. So things are really quite calm, quite normal down here. We just, from time to time, have got long convoys with military equipment moving from Volgograd down into Donetsk, into Ukraine. But literally, everything seems normal down here for us.
So at what point did you realize that the country you're in was in a full-blown war with its neighbors, Ukraine?
Well, we realized it was a full-blown war, probably at the point where the invasion started, sometime in February last year. But as the Russian government would always tell you, it's a special military operation and not a full-blown war. So, probably, yeah.
Well, there are several, students, Nigerians in Ukraine affected by this war. They've been back and forth. They've come back to the country. Some of them are now back in Ukraine. Some had to run to Poland and other neighboring countries. Do you know any? What do you think is going on with some of them now?
Well, I actually have got lots of friends that were students in Kharkiv at this time, and a lot of them are back home. Some of them are studying online. School has started for so many of them, but it's pretty difficult, having to leave so many of your belongings, leave so many of your friends, and you move completely unprepared, So it's pretty difficult for them. I have some friends who still live in Poland up till now. They're still trying to survive and still trying to put up their lives in pieces back together. Yeah.
Russian president has been, enlisting people in Russia to be a part of this war, people to fight alongside Russian troops. I'm not sure how many foreigners, were enlisted in that, but were there fears that, foreigners, Nigerians, other Africans, or other nationalities in Russia would be asked to join this war, at least if they still wanted to stay in Russia, that is?
Well, I don't think there should be consent for that, because the Russian law is pretty clear that for you to be in the army, you have got to have an experience for that. And I don't think Russia is up to the point where completely total civilians who have got no military history or no military background would be sought after or sought for going to the war front. They have got so much reserves. They have got millions of people who are on standby. But for Nigerians, for probably foreigners who have got a second citizenship, it's part of the law that when it comes to the clarion call to defend the motherland, if you're a Nigerian and also a Russian by naturalization, you obviously would be drafted to the military by then. Yeah.
So what's life been in Russia for students now?
Oh, well, for students living in Russia, I think life has been pretty normal, pretty interesting, and pretty difficult, because we have got relatively interesting sanctions. The financial sanctions from all parts of the world, including the United States, has got us living on a very difficult order, because we have got to make ends meet. So many of us used to have jobs where we worked remotely for foreign companies, and we can't have access to such jobs anymore. We had issues with MasterCard, Visa card, where we can't have foreign transactions, PayPal, and all the payment systems got shut. So life has been pretty difficult and also pretty interesting, because we're learning to have to do different interesting things that we haven't done like forever. But life has been pretty interesting, and it's been also challenging for a whole lot of students, because at some point we had high prices for goods and services, rise almost to 50-60% increase, but things are pretty normal right now. I think things are getting back to normal.
Well, it's been a year now since that crisis started, but did you ever, at any point in time, think of, coming back home and just laying low for a while?
Oh, well, when it started, though, we actually did consider going home, but we understood that it wasn't going to generate into something so catastrophic, because I think the Ukrainians are actually defending, because they were the ones who were invaded. So it's pretty clear that Russia is attacking. So as Ukraine is defending, we have got no cause for worry or no cause for alarm for now. Yeah. So I never did consider going home. No, I never did.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for your time, Jonah, and do continue to be safe. Thank you for having you on the program today.
Thank you.
Что вы приняли приглашение.